And most importantly, the data dogs of the world find issues before ideally your customers do. That doesn't exist in the data world, where frequently when a data issue occurs, it's the customer that finds out, right? It's the VP of sales that messages a data team and says, "Why does this dashboard look wrong?"
Let's welcome Kevin to the show. Good morning, Kevin. How are you?
Hey, good morning. Yeah, great to be on the show, Fru. I'm a fan. We chatted a little bit beforehand. You gave me some background about what you do, and I'm just really excited to be here. So thanks for the opportunity.
Thank you so much. Where are you calling from today?
Calling from Boston,
From Boston.
and it's a little bit gray and rainy outside, but not complaining.
Wow. So you must be very close to the brain trust with all the academic institutions out there, and you do have a very strong academic background. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, for better or worse. I never thought I would come to Boston. Uh, Always wanted to go to the West Coast. Came here for undergrad, studied physics. Thought I was going to go into tech after that, but found an amazing advisor, and then just followed him into grad school. And yeah, I just spent 10 years from beginning to end at MIT, uh, doing more computer science and automated data analysis work during my PhD. Part of the motivation was realizing early on that many of the barriers to analyzing data is not because you don't understand the data, right? Oftentimes, if you're a scientist and you're collecting, experimental data, you know exactly what it means and what shape you want it to be in and what kinds of analyses you want to run. The problem is that if you don't know R or Python or SQL, you can't really translate what you want to do into something that a computer will execute for you. And that
Mhm.
gap is kind of absurd, in my opinion, right? Why are some of
Wow.
the smartest people in the world bottlenecked by this? And this is true in companies too, right? You have salespeople, marketing leaders, engineers who just aren't able to get that last mile of data.
Mhm.
That's what I was working on in grad school.
Oh wow, pretty fascinating. Is that what you have a PhD, right? Is that what your PhD was about?
It was all about that. It was
Uh,
specifically trying to take automated data analysis, so data visualization, statistical analysis, like type detection, and turn that from a very rule-based system.
mhm.
So, like if you know, go into your favorite data analysis tool and open up the lid, how do you do type detection? It's a bunch of if statements, but you could think, in principle, there must be a way to train a machine learning model to do that better than a bunch of if statements can.
Mhm.
And what you need to do that is have a lot of training data. So our work, and it was definitely a team effort, was to collect the training data and then to create the first versions of those models.
Wow, that's pretty fascinating, and I'm very excited today because when I came across you and the work is in relation to a product and a company that you're running as a CEO called Metaplane. Now, before we talk about Metaplane, I just have to admit here that I have a and I do these interviews with many different teams and many different products, but I have a special affinity or a special place in my heart for founders and CEOs who are not just on the business side, but who also have the technical acumen that you have. Can you talk a little bit about that side of you and how you came to that?
Oh, the technical side of things, or
Yeah. Well, being a technical CEO, because it seems like that's kind of
Hmm.
a breed we don't see a lot in the industry.
I do gotta say that I don't spend as much time writing code as I wish I did. I would say that my job day to day is sales and marketing. If
Yeah.
I'm lucky, I can do sales engineering. Occasionally, we had a nice sit down yesterday. Let me actually pull over this whiteboard
Oh, sure.
where we're totally revamping
Oh,
how we do
wow.
anomaly detection on the back end with the team.
Wow. I can see some distribution curves there. So that's pretty interesting.
There's definitely some distributions, yeah, plenty of them on our end,
Yeah.
but I think being a technical founder is not necessarily the only way to start a company, right? Maybe
Mhm.
being a sales led founder leads to a lot of good advantages in the early
Hmm.
days, right? Like you know how to sell to large enterprises more naturally without coaching. You might be more customer focused, but in a space like ours where you and me and all of our customers are all technical, I think people do appreciate when a product is crafted in a way that respects the expertise of its
Hmm.
users, and that you communicate with your users in a way that it's like, I'm not trying to sell you something, I'm talking to a peer, because that's
Yeah.
what we're doing, that's what we do when we talk to our customers.
Hmm.
Is many times our customers are more technical than we are. We're not
Exactly.
trying to sell them magic, we're trying to sell them something that they know how to make. They just have better stuff to do with their time.
Yeah. Trying to solve a problem.
Exactly.
Yeah, so really cool. Let's dive into data observability and the work at Metaplane. Can you talk about and what I want to really understand here for the viewers that are watching this is what is data observability, and how is Metaplane as a product solving that?
In one sentence, data observability is the degree of visibility you have into your data systems. But let's unpack that a little bit and say, like, in the software world, you have tools like Datadog, you have tools like Splunk, and what they do is they monitor all of your systems, collect metrics, traces, and logs so that you know at any point in time what the state of your software infrastructure was. So if like a box goes down or an API performance is degrading, you know ahead of time while that's happening, and while you're debugging, you have a whole, you know, stack of traces that you can work through to help you understand how to debug this issue. And most importantly, the data dogs of the world find issues before ideally your customers do. That doesn't exist in the data world, where frequently when a data issue occurs, it's the customer that finds out, right? It's the VP of sales that messages a data team and says, "Why does this dashboard look wrong?" And that's not ideal. Not only because it takes up a lot of time from the data team, but because it reduces trust in data, right? You put in all this effort to, use an amazing tool like Snowflake, put all of your data in there and you activate it. But if your users don't trust it, well, that's a lot of work for you know, you to figure
Yeah.
out. So data observability is trying to collect as much metadata as possible from your various systems, including
Mhm.
information about the internal characteristics of your data, to help you gain visibility and help you get ahead of these kinds of issues.
Yeah, that's a really good way to put it. I remember, and I think you brought up the example there of the VPs being the ones that figure it out. I call it the Monday morning message or the quarter in phone call, right? Because it seems like that's your job, right? To always spot the errors. My data, the report looks old, or why is this sale so low? And somebody has to go respond. And the moment you're being that reactive, it usually is not a good position to be in, especially for data engineering teams.
Definitely not. And we all know you have way better stuff to do with your time.
Hmm.
I like the Monday morning message. We like to call it executive driven testing, EDT. Very cutting edge. Uh, it's From our perspective, it's a disconnect, right? Because as data practitioners, we know data is not perfect. It can only be suitable for a use case.
Hmm.
However, the people who consume data, correctly or incorrectly assume, okay, data is always perfect, right? And therefore, if something is wrong with it, well, what do we pay you to do? We pay you to
Hmm.
deliver high quality data. So there's a bit of a disconnect that's going on in the world right now. We're trying to bridge that disconnect.
Yeah, pretty cool. So is this a new space that's being created, or has this existed before? So thinking about, the space of data governance has been out there for a while with data quality, and even folks like and we'll get into the technical details here. DBTs, they have great expectations and certain things that are being built to help with quality and some form of observability. Is that kind of what we're talking about here, or is there more to this conversation?
There's a bit more. I would say that, but you are right that data quality is not a new problem, Right,
Mhm.
back in the 1970s, with the first relational databases, Edgar Codd at IBM talked about data quality. And for the past 50 years, people have been writing SQL scripts that are executed, on a cron job to just make sure that data integrity and data accuracy constraints are being met. That's nothing new. What is new is tools like Snowflake that's, separate storage from compute and let you scale compute infinitely, that make it so that if you have hourly jobs that check on your data quality, that it doesn't cut into the actual analytical workloads, right? You have it
Mm.
on separate warehouses. So there's no longer this trade-off between performance and integrity,
Mhm.
but rather uh, it enables a whole category of tools, including Metaplane, to come in and soak up all of that metadata.
Wow, that's pretty cool. Because I remember again just going down memory lane here, with the legacy systems on prem where you had just centralized compute. No one would ever let you try to do observability on production because you're gonna impact that performance for everyone else. And so I'm guessing that's why we didn't see this innovation at the time, but now with this new kind of framework and paradigm we live in with snowflakes, that's then possible.
That that is true from the
Mhm,
supply side, as in
mhm,
it's now possible to build these kinds of tools. I would say that there's another curve coming in from the demand side where we're collecting more and more data, right? Snowflake makes
mhm.
that possible. 23 bucks a terabyte. Come on. Why wouldn't you ETL your data in there? And then we're using that data for more and more use cases, right? BI is as old as software. Hey, decision support will always be here. It is always going to be one of the main use cases of data. But machine learning and artificial intelligence, reverse ETL into your operational tools to power go to market workflows, sending your data back to your customers. These are relatively new, at least in terms of mainstream adoption. And with these use cases, the stakes are much higher because when you have automation or customer communications that are based on data, it cannot
Yeah.
go wrong. Like, so supply and demand, those two make this time the right time for a data observability tool, really a whole category to be birthed into
Mhm.
existence.
Yeah, that's really interesting with the inflection point we're reaching. Now, I know we're going to get into a demo here, which is part of what a lot of our audience like to see in these sessions. But what I wanted to ask you and to get your perspective on this is who wakes up in the morning and says, I want more observability in my data pipelines, in my machine learning models? Who is that target audience? Is it the data engineering teams, or is it the VP of marketing or the VP of sales, or some VP who is going to say, you guys or the team should better have more observability? Where does that impetus come from?
That is a good question. First thing I'll point out that I don't think anyone wakes up saying, I want data observability. Even I don't say that. But if you do, you know where to reach me. Kevin at Metaplane.dev, we have a tool for you. I think people wake up and say, I wish I had better data quality. I wish all this stuff would stop breaking, right? And that data observability is one technology that can be used to solve data quality. There are other ways to solve it, but in terms of data quality, it's both the data. I would say it's even three categories. It's the people who work with data directly, like the data teams, data engineers, analytics engineers. Those are our core customers, but also the people who consume the data do think about data quality, but they might not be using the same words as we use to describe it, right? They might
Hmm.
talk about a dashboard being delayed, a number looking weird,
Hmm.
and ask about, okay, what are what calculations went into this? They wouldn't use the term lineage. So it's
Hmm.
different words to describe the same need.
Yeah. So, do you see a maturity where organizations have to hit a certain level of maturity for them to then have that need for data observability? Or would you recommend that just r- when you have the pain, go look for it? Um, where do you see that? Because different data engineering teams are on different levels of maturities. Some are embracing the cloud, some still have legacy tools, Some are barely trying to even be data driven. So where in that spectrum do you see this need for observability really coming up?
I think it's like with software observability, where at first, for the first few years, people would bring on like a Datadog when their
Hmm.
systems went down. But now Datadog is one of the first things you install onto your, Kubernetes cluster when you spin
Hmm.
one up in AWS. So it's true, you're right that currently it can be a bit reactive. You know, things went wrong and therefore we'll bring on data observability tool. But what we're seeing is more and more teams, especially really cutting edge ones, are bringing on data observability ahead of data quality issues happening. And that's actually a really good time to do it because instead of losing trust and having to build it back up, let's
Hmm.
keep it at 100 and keep it there.
Yeah, that's a really good takeaway. I think you've really hit me with that point there. Just doing it right from the get go, and that the friction to bring into, and I'm sure we're gonna see this in the demo, is relatively low, right? It's not a lot of overhead to instrument your pipelines to get the observability you want, and so teams could be empowered to do that right from the get go instead of being reactive. Um, one other thing that was relevant to me, I was thinking about this is, I don't know if you know Naval Ravikant. He's a tech leader in the
Mhm.
CEO space in Silicon Valley. He talks a lot, and one of the things he talks philosophy and technology, and I watch a lot of his stuff. One of the things he talks about is this concept of um, omniscience is omnipotent. Basically what that means
Interesting.
is that knowledge is power. And as I think about the concept of observability, is you're trying to get more knowledge about the system, which necessitates more power, more action you can take. Because if your system, you have a bunch of pipelines, you have no idea what's going on, you have no idea of the distributions of your data, the data types, the semantics, or the syntax of it, you're very powerless. Is that a good kind of way to look at it? What would be your thoughts on,
It
on
is a
something like
good
that?
way. I like Naval. I
Yeah.
have his almanac. I think
Yeah.
it's a great quote. Uh,
Uh-huh.
it's a great way to look at it. And I'll just add on to it with maybe a cute analogy, which is that
Hmm.
like data teams, what do? We provide data for other teams to understand their performance, to prioritize their work, to
Hmm.
understand their impact. However, it's ironic that data teams don't have their own data to make those kinds of decisions, right? If you go to a
Wow.
data team today and you ask, okay, what are your most used dashboards that you should refactor the LookML for? What are your least used tables? Who in the organization most benefits from the data you're providing? What should you be working on this week? That frequently these decisions are very intuition driven,
Hmm.
not data driven, which is yeah, kind of
Yeah.
kind of bizarre, right? So in some ways, data observability is trying to provide data to the data teams. Better
Hmm.
knowledge leads to better action, more power. That quote that you were saying is exactly right.
Hmm. Yeah. Awesome. And do we tend to see observability here as a thermostat or more of a thermometer? But because my guess is that we're starting as a more of a thermometer, trying to gauge what's going on. Then maybe with the help of AI and more instrumentation, you can solve problems instead of just being an observer. Is that kind of the direction where you see things going, starting from a thermostat perspective, from a thermometer perspective, eventually to trying to be, all right, we can observe all these problems, but you can tell me there are problems, but what if you could just go fix it once you identify them?
I like that analogy. It's a very early field. So right now
Mhm.
we're just in one of those like glass thermometers with mercury inside.
Yeah.
It takes a while to figure it out, and then you can't really see is this like 90,
Uh-huh.
like 97 or 96. Next year will become an actual thermometer that you see on the wall. The year after
Hmm.
that will be like a Nest thermostat. We'll learn from your
Exactly.
data. Uh, we're not quite there yet. The
Hmm.
entire field is early, but I think, like you said, knowledge is power, but power is also power. Like if you can
Exactly.
prevent issues from happening, if you could, you know, quarantine data that's incorrect and put it over here, if you could
Hmm.
automatically notify people who are impacted by issues, like wow, now we're talking.
Wow, pretty cool. So let's dive in. I think I usually like to see the products for themselves, especially for our audience. Do you want to maybe go through a quick demo, educate us on what it takes to get something like Metaplane up and running, and we're gonna have a conversation as we go through that demo.
Definitely. And spoiler alert, it does not take very much to get started, but I will just, yeah, let me share my screen.
All right.
Do you see that by chance?
Yes.
Perfect.
There you go.
So this demo really has three parts. It goes from most boring to most interesting. So bear with the first part for a second. And yeah, it's a Metaplane one-liner. It's a data observability tool that plugs into your data stack and helps you be the first to know of data issues before executives let you know. And in the market today, their Metaplane is the only self-serve tool that you can just get started using, and you can try it yourself, let the tool speak for itself. And that's why I start the demo from the landing page, which is that if you go to Metaplane.dev, you can just create an account. We have a free trial, we have a free tier even. And for the demo, I'm just going to sign in with my personal account. There's really three steps to get started. So I'm going to go to the onboarding screen.
So just for the audience, so anyone watching this can literally access the landing page and they can be up and running, very similar to what you did here. Is that correct?
That's correct. You could do it
Awesome.
right now.
All right. Is there a specific cloud preference in terms of some of the major cloud providers like say Azure, AWS, or GCP, or it doesn't matter for the end user perspective?
It doesn't really matter from the end user perspective. We don't support everything. However, we do support the most common tools in the modern data stack. For example, so there's three steps to get fully started with Metaplane. Connect Snowflake. Shout out to Snowflake. Amazing data cloud. Let's get on it. But also like BigQuery, Redshift, transactional databases, Postgres, MySQL, and starting to support OLAP databases like ClickHouse, DBT Cloud, most of the major BI tools, Looker, Mo, Tableau, Sigma, etc.
Okay.
And
So yes, sorry, in there. So you have the data stores or the data infrastructure where curation or transformation happens, which typically has a lot of logic, and then at the consumption layer. So it seems like you on that spectrum, you're supporting all those three key pillars.
exactly. And every time you connect one pillar, we automatically extract the lineage to every other one.
Mm-hmm.
So if you have Snowflake and DBT, we'll ingest the lineage DAG, so the graph of table to table dependencies,
Mm-hmm.
overlay that onto Snowflake. Once you put in Looker, we'll automatically extract lineage from a Snowflake column to a LookML Explore field to dashboard elements to dashboards, so that when something goes wrong, you know exactly what is impacted by it.
Okay.
Step number 2 is to connect your Slack or email or PagerDuty or some alerting destination. And step number 3 is to, basically toggle on and off if you want us to automatically create tests for you. And the reason we do this is because Snowflake, shout out again, as well as some other databases provide row count and freshness metadata within information schema. So we're able to
Mm-hmm.
retrieve the number of rows or the last time a table was updated without having to actually run a query. So it's effectively, you know, free for our
Yeah.
customers to run that.
Yeah, because you're getting it from they call it the cloud services layer without necessarily impacting the actual tables. So yeah, so really cool. Now, from a notification perspective, can you talk about that and how teams are leveraging it? Is Slack really what teams lean more towards, or are there observability dashboards that the industry tends to go towards?
Oh, both, both.
Hmm.
I'll show you a Slack alert in just a sec.
Hmm.
And Slack is the primary way that our customers are notified of an alert, or Slack, or Microsoft Teams. But messages are a very natural way to fit into a team's workflow. But we also have dashboards that you can visualize these kinds of errors.
Okay. Really cool. And then maybe we didn't talk about this. I know, and what you talk a lot about, the four pillars of of observability. I believe, correct me if I'm wrong here, is probably metadata, metrics, lineage, and something else. Do you want to talk about that
Logs.
and logs? There you go. And what gets to be captured here for the audience?
Wow. At least someone's reading those posts. I appreciate it. You know better than I do. No,
No,
like
I just try to do my homework before coming into these sessions.
wow, that warms my heart. So the way we think about data observability is that we try and collect every piece of information that describes in detail what is going on with your data system. And two pieces of information describe data sets in themselves. So if someone gives you one table, how do you describe it? There's some internal characteristics like the distribution of a column or whether or not another column contains PII. We call those metrics. We have the external characteristics of the table, like the number of rows or the schema or the freshness. We call that metadata. And we also have internal and external interactions. So interactions between tables, lineage describes that one table descends from a whole set of other tables based on what operations. And then logs are the breadcrumbs of interactions between a human and a data system. So like someone looks at a dashboard or someone inputs a field, or between a machine and a machine. Like Fivetran is replicating the contacts object from Salesforce into your Snowflake table. So put together, these four pillars describe in arbitrary detail what you might want to know about your data system. And Metaplane collects all four.
Oh, okay. And do you have to actively select that as well here in the UI, or is that something that just automatically happens behind the scenes?
It automatically happens.
Hmm.
So, speaking of logs, something that you're going to get straight off the bat is that we start ingesting your query logs and start creating uh, analyses on how different tables and columns are being used over time, as well as how queries are trending over time. So here you see a distribution of like various tables in your data warehouse, how many queries have been running in the past week, the average number of queries per week, and how long queries against those tables take. You get that immediately when plugging in Snowflake.
Wow, that's pretty powerful. Because in a previous life, I've seen teams literally writing Python scripts to try to do this. But what we're seeing here is you get basically cookbooks or templates out of the bat without you having to go do a lot of manual work.
That's exactly it.
Hmm.
And to your point before, right, many teams are doing this manually, right? Just
Hmm.
let us take care of it for you.
Yeah. That's very cool. So just to summarize this here and make sure I'm tracking this along, data teams today have existing ways of ingesting, curating, and building data products or data pipelines. The challenge with that is something goes wrong, the wrong distribution, the wrong value in a column, and whatever goes wrong in that data, teams don't have visibilities into that. We can bring in data observability tools like Metaplane to be the observer, to surface those issues for you in a very seamless, non-intrusive fashion. Did I summarize that correctly, or?
Are you looking for a job? Are you looking? No, you did it better than you described it better than we could. That is exactly what we do.
All right. I appreciate that. So the next question I have too is we can look at the metadata described, but with some conversations I've had, and I had a team in the previous demo that went out the week before talking about correlated fidelity. So each individual columns could be valid, but once you start thinking about, oh, okay, date of birth has some relation to say age, or age has some relation to buying potential from a business perspective. So that extra business knowledge about the data, how does that get captured? Because that tribal knowledge is with the business. Is that something you see work being done around that, and how does that make it into Metaplane?
It is valid. I think
Hmm.
the It's probably more important when monitoring metrics. So there's a whole field of business observability in which domain knowledge is extremely important.
Mhm.
I would say when you're a bit more upstream of that within the warehouse, and I should check out that video. I may be, misspeaking on their behalf. They could be in the warehouse, but within the warehouse, honestly, tables are tables. And
Mhm.
that our customers span so many different verticals from e-commerce to financial services to healthcare to B2B SaaS, B2C consumer. And every single company is unique. However, when you are monitoring lineage, so here's like a lineage page
Mhm.
that you get off the bat as well, a column level lineage between within your warehouse and between your warehouse and BI tools, and critically onto when you're monitoring the data itself, that some characteristics of the data, like the metrics and metadata we talked about, are kind of generic. And you can actually find a whole lot of issues by monitoring those more generic signals.
Mhm. Can you talk about what we're seeing here on the screen? I see row counts and freshness and cardinality checks. Um, are this out of the box, and could users define their own custom monitoring expectations or rules as well?
Exactly. Yeah. You're looking at the command and control center of Metaplane
Mhm.
where your info schema is on the left. So database schema table columns. And across the top are different types of tests. Row counts, freshness, like you said, tracking the cardinality of an enum, uniqueness of a primary key, distribution of a numeric metric. And you can see that some are green, some are red. We'll look into an example in a sec. But our philosophy is that if it's not easy to add tests, that you will not have tests. That there's
That's
many
true.
other, yeah, it's like so many things for you to do. And using Metaplane, if you wanted to track the nullness of this ID, click a button and you've got it. You can add it in bulk, you can remove them in bulk, and you can also, to your question, create any custom SQL test that if it
Mm.
returns a number, will track the number for you. If it returns a result set, will track the number of rows for you.
Wow, really, really powerful. Um, and this actually sparked something in the head that got me thinking. If you think about the dependencies between not just inside of organizations and the different teams, but even across organizations. So let's say an M&A, I'm trying to acquire data feeds from a particular company. Do you envision, and maybe not, but I'm just kind of throwing this out here, kind of an observability score that because you have visibility into all these different pipelines, you can say, hey, this data set you're getting from this particular vendor, we've instrumented it with the right metrics and checks that we can somehow certify or provide some score to this that is neutral and somebody can test it. Or am I thinking too ambitiously about that?
No, sure. I mean, previously my job offer was in sales and marketing. Now it's in
Mhm.
product because
Yeah.
apparently, this is something that we are working on,
Mhm.
both aggregating, to your point, the data quality from various sources and different tables, but also producing a more digestible status page because
Mhm.
like this page is good for the data team, right? They
Mhm.
know what the columns and tables are. This page is not good for the data consumers, right?
Mhm.
They're looking at this page and the eyes will just glaze over. So I think
Mhm.
you're so right about that.
Wow, very powerful. Let's talk about the enterprise side of things. Some is this ready for? And I can guess the answer to this is yes, but you keep me honest. With native enterprise support, SSO, OAuth, and who gets to be in to log into these systems and how you integrate with other enterprise tools. Is this at that level, or can you talk a little bit about that?
It is at that level
Hmm.
that we have several enterprise customers who use us like across multiple teams. I
Hmm.
would say that our sweet spot is probably if you're less than 5,000 users
Hmm.
and 5,000 employees, mostly because we're focused squarely on the engineering workflow today.
Hmm.
That everything that we're building is optimized for engineers. occasionally for the leaders of those teams. And for very large companies, you might require a bit more reporting features. We will get there in a few months, but for now, we're focused a bit down market.
All right, pretty cool. And just to get again put a little bit of my security hat here for where is this metadata? Because metadata is a very valuable data set for a lot of organizations. As we're collecting a lot of this, teams might be asking, where is this being stored? Is this staying within my VPC, within my controls, or am I giving it up to some other person to manage that? And what certifications, maybe HIPAA or that you can talk about in this space in terms of the data locality and some of the certifications that you have in place to give peace of mind to teams that care about that.
Yeah, there's no skimping on security and privacy in 2022. And while Metaplane is a managed service, and we are deliberately so because we want to bring data observability to as many teams as possible, and deploying within your VPC can be quite a lot of friction. So Metaplane today you can get started in 10 minutes. But as a result of being a managed service where we do collect metadata and summary statistics and we store on our data stores. So this is not PII. This is not, PHI. It's, number of rows of different tables. Now, like you said, that even that is still valuable. So we are SOC 2, HIPAA, and GDPR, CCPA compliant.
That's awesome. That's just awesome. It's always a necessary question for folks asking. Data about data, which is basically metadata, is very valuable. Just to kind of, as we're wrapping up here, kind of segue. Are you playing on the name of? There seems to be a lot of meta going on. There is Meta at Facebook. There is a lot of Meta. Is that where this is coming from? Are you playing on that, or just trying to ride that wave?
We had Metaplane before they had Meta. So
Oh, that's good.
and if they ever go into the aerospace industry, maybe they can buy our domain. But the origin of the term is coming from networking, computer networking, where there's the data plane and then there's a control plane. So like the data transfer layer and then the logical layer, and that we want to be the metadata plane. That's where Metaplane came from.
Oh, the metadata plane. That makes sense.
And
pretty cool.
And because of that, that's why we have as we create these tests, we get the metadata every hour by default. Is that we now have a historical record of how your data evolves over time. So we have so every single test that you create, we have an automated anomaly detection system for you on the back end. We train it on historical data and try and take seasonality and trends into account. So here's a number of rows that dropped from 2.6 million to 200,000. Here's the freshness of a table that goes from 45 minutes and it spikes to 3 hours and it spikes to 12 hours. And then here recently is an actual alert that we sent to our customer where a dimension table, we expected it to refresh every half an hour and it's been 1.5 hours. And here you can see where we include the upstream and downstream lineage, which Looker dashboards were affected by this delay, and you can give feedback to our model. So this is where your question about domain knowledge comes into play. Is you can mark it as anomaly, so we can continue alerting, mark it as normal, so we take it into the confidence intervals, or mute it and collapse it. So that's the real end-to-end of Metaplane, and why we think of ourselves as the one place, the metadata plane, that you have all of the metadata throughout time in one place.
Very, very cool. And what do you and I like the analogy of the data dog for data. Can you talk a little bit about AI space and machine learning and models? And one of the big talks in the industries today is about model explainability. Could observability be relevant in that space? And is that something you're thinking about, or is that a completely different space altogether?
It's very adjacent. I think it's a little bit early. And it pains me to say that as someone who's trained in machine learning, but it's early. However, it will come. And when it does come, it's very important to have both model and data observability, because much of the data that is going into these models is coming from a data warehouse like Snowflake, right? So it's important to track that. However, it is important to also track specific qualities of the models that you're developing. Like, what is the model performance? However, you choose to measure that. How is the model performance between training and test scenarios? Data observability tools will not be able to do that for you.
Wow, very, very powerful. Kevin, this has been very insightful, talking about not just data observability, but actually seeing a product. You literally showed this in what, 3 minutes? You got it up and running. Just shows to the simplicity of it. So thank you, thank you very much. For the audience, where can they find you? How can they get a hold of this? What's the best way to reach out to you? I can imagine you're a very busy person. Um,
Never too busy to not talk about data. Yeah, anyone who
mhm.
wants to chat, just hit me up. Kevin@Metaplane.dev is my email. Kevin Zeng who Kevin Zeng who is who I am on Twitter and on LinkedIn. And to get started with Metaplane, yeah, it's like less than 10 minutes. We want to make it a no-brainer. You're a busy person. Just go to Metaplane.dev and you can get started. Or check out our docs, check out our video, whatever is most comfortable for you.
That's awesome. Thank you very much, Kevin. And we're gonna leave all those links in the description below. So if you wanna check it out or try it out for yourself, all of those will be available in the description below. So Kevin, again, thank you very much for joining with Demo Hub. I really appreciate it, and we'll talk to you next time.
Such a pleasure. Thanks for having me on.
All right, thank you.